this whole concept, does research, and assists companies with implementation. And on top of that, he's written, I think, about 15 books and about 100 articles on business management related to human resources. And I will say, as an independent observer, he is, I think, the first in the human resources field, or among them. He's very humble and he won't allow me to say that, but he's really one of the first that really began to take a stakeholder view, a strategic and systematic view of value creation in human resources. And we're going to listen to that and learn more about it in just 1 minute. I did want to always, of course, well, we're not even going to do that. So here we go. I'm going to stop sharing my screen in 1 second here, Dave. This has really been a great day of the Gremlins, but it's best to be focused on you anyway. So, Dave, before we're going to talk for the rest of this session today on really what is a human resources or human capital management system. How did you come up with the idea? What is the research behind it? The impact on stakeholders? We're going to talk all about that. But there's a very timely subject that I want to start with first that I think affects a lot of people in human resources. And that is this entire issue of taking stances on political and social issues. And just to take you off the hook on this, our organization has steadfastly said no. We will make no statements on political and social issues of any kind unrelated to the purpose of our organization, which is to enhance performance through people in a strategic manner. So we just won't get involved, and we support all just people, all good people, and we hope they all work out their issues, but we don't get involved. Well, Dave, what do you think? This is a tough issue for people in HR. And by the way, one other thing, a lot of Jewish people and Arab people don't even agree on this issue. So even if you take a stance, you're just going to piss people off. So, but that's my view. What's yours?
Well, I love by the way, thank you for all your gracious comments and inviting me, Bruce, to join you. I appreciate it. And to the gremlins who got me and got you both, we hope they will go away. We appreciate technology gremlins. And I was teaching a class recently and I said to the students, email me if you have a question. And they said, how old are you? So the question you raise is really good. What's the purpose of an organization? The purpose of an organization is to create a product or service that creates value for its customers and investors and employees. I believe organizations are one of the most critical innovations in modern history and ancient history. Look at what happens because of organizations. The clothes we wear were not made by just people. An organization, man. The eyeglasses, the welcome to my office, the books on the shelves. Organizations create value, and they create value to those who use the organization. When people in organizations start to get out of that value creation lane, they sometimes get in trouble. You see that today with Bud Light. You see it with Disney. You see it in organizations that begin to be not just organizations creating value, but I don't happen to drink, but I know those who drink. Bud Light created value for them. Disney created value for those who came. When you stay in your lane, you have an ability to create value for your customer and your investor and your employees. When you get out of your lane, you begin to get outside of what you're trying to accomplish. And so my advice to organization leaders is to say, we all have social responsibility. We all feel that personally. You feel it, I feel it. And hopefully there's a great book out called Love Your Enemies, the idea of respecting each other. And it's a Christian value, it's an Islamic value, it's a Jewish value, a Buddhist value, a Hindu value is to respect everybody. But in your organization, we exist as an organization to create value for a customer, an investor, an employee, and a community. And when we stay in that lane, we're more likely to be successful. I'll give one quick example. Intel, great company. Everybody wants to be philanthropic, and it's good to do philanthropy. Intel executives said, we need electricity and we need water to produce our product. So they are taking stands of value-based social responsibility around water and electricity because it's connected to the value they create through the product they create.
Wow.
And when you can see that line of sight, I think you're going to be much more effective than when you begin to get outside your lane into some adjacencies. Long answer to a very important question.
Well, and I think it's very critical, folks, that, and I think it's fair for an organization to make a statement, put it on their website. What is their position related to getting outside of their lane? And we're going to move on, but it's funny. I know another organization, they provide charities for corporations. It's very interesting, and the way theirs works, they won't allow. And it's, by the way, I think they're founded. They might have religious people in the group. They will allow no religious, social, political groups to participate in that at all. The only charities they support are those that directly help social services for people, and they religiously, no pun intended, address that. So I think there's a big lesson here. I don't think there's any reason for CEOs to get confused. Stay out of politics, and unless it's directly related to the purpose and goals of your organization. Um, getting back to you, uh, Dave, I've been following your work for years, as you know. And when did you really come up with this concept of this strategic and systematic proactive approach to HR rather than, I must say, the old paradigm of kind of a social services, keep everybody under control compliance?
You know, I didn't start my world in HR. I started my business by saying, how do you help a company succeed in the marketplace? I'll go back to where we were. I believe organizations have they're an incredible vehicle to do good. I got in this field. I was a student decades ago, obviously, because I'm old, and I took a class in organizational behavior. And the professor said, there's nothing required for you, but go look at the organizations where you live, where you work, where you worship. Look at the organizations around you. How do they affect your life? And write a paper about what you're learning. I wrote 15 10-page papers, one a week. And he called me in and he said, you're wacko. He's still a mentor, Bonner Ritchie. And he said, what did you learn? I said, the organizations shape our lives, because when we come together from individual views as a team, teams work. And there's all kinds of research on that. Teams outperform individuals. So I ended up doing a PhD. How do you define an effective organization? And it's not just your strategy. It's not just your product. It's not just your financial acumen. It's what do you do inside? That an organization is not just defined by its structure. It's not just defined by its product or services. In fact, previous to some of the work, you look at SIC code. You're an electronics firm. Well, two electronics firms can be very different. And so I started digging inside. And guess what I discovered? The way we hire people, the way we train people, the way we build a culture, the way we manage our leadership, all of those internal people systems began to be what really defines an organization. People don't thrive just because we produce a chip at Intel. They thrive because the Intel management system creates a process that regenerates itself. And so I started figuring out, what is that process? And lo and behold, it has to do with talent. Do you get the right people, right skills, right commitment, right communication, right diversity, right engagement? Has to do with culture. Do you get the right systems, the right organizational values? Has to do with leadership. And then underlying that, it has to do with your HR process. So that's where I got into HR, not to become an HR person. In fact, it was decades before I could ever do, I shouldn't confess this, any of the traditional HR systems. Do an HR planning workshop. Well, I don't know how to do that. In fact, I got, probably embarrassing here, I got put on a board of directors of a very good firm called Herman Miller, and they made me the head of the comp committee because I have a professor of HR. One meeting, and I had to hire a consultant to get in and do some of the details. So I love the agenda of managing organization and people so that the company thrives because it creates value for the employee, for the customer, for the investor, and for the community. That's
Well,
where I got into the field.
well, let's get to that whole stakeholder approach, which you very interestingly brought. And now I know something that I didn't know before. You, like me, are an outsider to HR. I too am an outsider to HR.
Where
And
did
I
you come
consider
from?
myself,
How did you get into it?
well, this show isn't about me,
I
okay?
know, but it's about me learning, and learning is
Well, I'll
learning
just
about you.
quickly say that very coincidentally, right, my first job out of college was with a horrendous company. Horrendous. It was a great job, a horrendous company run by, all due respect to my military, our servicemen. He was run by a military, type, and bang, bang, bang. And I hated the job and I was out of there as fast as I could be. In fact, I even wrote a book, a short story that never got published on a kid starting a union. But anyway, to get to the point, I got a job at a magazine on management and marketing in 1989. And it became totally apparent to two things: that business massively wastes money through a lack of alignment, a lack of harmonization. And I worked for a great company, an employee-owned company, but I, through that job, had an opportunity to interview hundreds and hundreds of companies, and all I saw was dysfunction, fighting, interfighting, wasting resources, and lots of waste being buried. And at the same time, I was involved with the total quality management movement in the 1990s. And that's where they were beginning to apply a strategic and systematic approach to quality by involving all your stakeholders, aligning and harmonizing their interests, giving them a lot of voice, employee involvement, giving them good metrics, and then giving a lot of authority, so they could stop that assembly line if there's a defect. And the effect on quality over a 10-year period was huge. So I founded an institution to do research at Northwestern University over 9 years, which found an incredible link between having highly engaged customers, highly engaged employees, and financial results. And it's clearly correlative. It's not, a lot of times, is there a correlation? Sometimes there isn't. Sometimes it's a coincidence. So I came at it from, hey, this is just better business, and it involves aligning the interests of all your stakeholders. And as soon as I saw you writing, because it's my job, I've been doing this since 1989, to follow people like you, what's new, I jumped on it, because you have always, always looked at, and I thought you came from HR, because the HR field really likes you. And usually, I'm not sure how much they like outsiders who rattle the cage. And you have rattled the cage in HR. And Dave, so my next question is, before we get into some of you did kind
Well,
of give it.
let me just do a comment. But one of the first pieces I wrote was Serendipity, 1989, and it was called Complete Customer Commitment. And we looked at the data that showed the correlation. And let me just give you the broad statistics. I love data, by the way. My PhD is in taxonomy, and taxonomy is about simplifying complexity. We show the correlation between employee engagement, customer engagement, and financial performance. And the rule of thumb was approximately the following: a 10-point increase on employee engagement, 5% on customer, and 2.5% on financial. And that just shows in almost any industry. It can be done in banks. It was done by others. It can be done in retail. Can be done in any industry. And in 1989, we wrote that. And that's what you just said: employee, customer, financial. Those results are powerful, because you go to a business leader, and now we're going to get into my bias, and you go to a business leader and you say, would you like to make your people happy? And they go, yeah, every other day. Would you like to get your customer happy more often, almost every day? Would you like to increase your financial results? Yeah, because that affects me and it affects the stability of my company. I have a pathway to do that. If you want to get an increase in financial results, increase customer. Duh. If you want to get an increase in customer, increase employee. Duh. Good. Let's go to work. Anyway, I love what you said. It's funny, that article, I looked it up the other day in 1989. It's interesting. I'm not the only one doing this. Let me just say, there are some brilliant
No,
people.
Peter Drucker saw this, and W. Edward Deming saw it. But here's the big question then. I'll get cut right to it. Why don't okay, what has changed since you wrote that paper? Do you think the lessons of that paper and all of my 9 years of work at Northwestern and since then have really sunk in the way that total quality management has in manufacturing? Do you think that CEOs today understand that those same strategic and systematic approach that you advocate can create more profitability, and that they're burying a lot of profits into their bottom lines like they did quality? Where are we today on this, Dave? Have we made much progress?
The answer I'd say is never enough. Have we made some? Sure. The evidence of some, and I think COVID was actually an impetus. I think people said that was not a financial crisis. That was a people crisis, and managing your people. I think I love normal distribution statistics. 20% of CEOs have got this. They get it. They're off doing it. You find those companies. I find those companies. I'd love to take credit for them, but I hate to say it. I don't get in their way. Leave them alone. 20% of CEOs will never get there. You used a stereotype, by the way, of military. They're command and control executives wherever they come. And I actually find many great executives out of the military,
Yeah.
but wherever they come from, they're never going to get that. And I used to spend my time trying to worry about taking credit for the good 20 and trying to worry about converting the lousy 20. What's interesting is, and you can argue, the 60% in the middle,
Yep.
I think we're seeing progress. How do I see that? Davos. Go to where CEOs are spending time. WOBE conferences, Davos conferences. What are the topics? Almost across the board, there are people in organization. Go to private equity. Private equity is business on steroids. You talk about an enterprise model. Private equity, there's clear financial agenda. The private equity movement went through 3 phases. 1, clean up the financials. Got it. We know how to do that. Cut costs, get rid of stupid stuff. Clarify strategic agenda. We got it. Get rid of silly products. In private equity today, the hot topic is people and organization. And this is not a social agenda. I mean, we're not opposed to social agendas. Let me just be clear. But this is business. So I see business conferences, I see private equity, I see boards putting human capital, human capability, people stuff on their agenda. The government regulation, the SEC, has just required that companies report human capital. It's part of the regulation because it's material to business success. Have we made enough progress? No. The 20%, they're there. There'll be, I hope it's less than 20. There'll be 10 to 15% who are never going to get there. You can name those. They get big names in the media.
Well, you can name them because they advertise lies, right?
They advertise lies and then they destroy value.
And then they destroy value. We all know who they are, and they can get away with it in a legal system, and that's fine, as long as they can get away with it. But getting back to the why, I have a theory, and I'd like to bounce it off of you. I don't think anybody learns about this anywhere, period. I don't think it's taught in school. Here's what's not taught. What is not taught, except in a few schools, maybe in your class. I know at Darden University, Ed Friedman and they're up at Dartmouth. There are other professors who teach this, but it's still not taught. And that is the notion of value creation through a strategic and systematic approach to people management across the enterprise. Literally the same process that I think transformed manufacturing. It took 10 years because no one had ever heard of TQM. And it had to be taught. And I think the real reason is nobody knows what this is. It's not taught. And I know, you know how I know? When I read Fortune every day. I love, they have a daily newsletter. I highly recommend it. Alan Murray, Peter Vanham, they are still defining stakeholder capitalism wrong. They are still defining it as some notion that we're supposed to give money to people or whatever. What? We're supposed to be nice and kind. No, we're supposed to run our businesses well and create value and not offset our costs onto other people. So Dave, I think right now we're in the stage of this mess of a strategic and systematic approach to people management and your system, which is 26,000 people sometimes follow you, so they must know about this. But I think, isn't it that companies simply don't even know what it is that you're talking about to a degree? They have never heard about it before. They don't read about it in Fortune, in Time, in New York. I've never seen the New York Times ever write about this. Wall Street Journal. No one talks about value creation through a strategic and systematic approach to people in whatever I read. Isn't that fundamentally where we're at? The kind of, yeah, I like it, but what? What do I do? Of course, that leads you up to what you do.
Well, what I do is I try to make a difference. I'm less pessimistic. I think we see it. We do see it at WOBE conferences. We do see it in Fortune. One of the fascinating examples, Fast Company, in 2005 did an article, Why I Hate HR. And I'll always remember it because Steve Hammonds was the author, and I got asked by CNBC to do an interview. And I was like, yes, this is fun. I was in New York City on the streets. He was in his office in Philadelphia somewhere. And the interviewer said to me, well, they said to Steve Hammonds, what do you think? He said, I hate HR. It's a bureaucracy, administrative, all the legacy. It's the office, the gimmicks. And I said, I like HR. And he said, I hate HR. I said, I like HR. And the interview was 30 seconds long and it was stupid. and they cut it off. And even my wife, whose picture is behind me, said, Dave, that was really dumb. In 2023, 18 years later, they had an article, HR is the hottest place to be right now. So I think we're seeing people recognize, I don't care what they call it in some ways, we all have our own language, but the people, the organization, the soft stuff is the hard stuff. And I think we're beginning to see that because it's not just It's not soft stuff. This is not bring your pet to work.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
This is business results. And so when I sit with HR people and I say, you're an HR person going into a business meeting. Well, give an example on LinkedIn, and I'm on LinkedIn a lot. I've used LinkedIn. I've written 35 books and realized books are hard to sell anymore. And it takes a year to write them. I love the comments on LinkedIn.
Yeah,
And
I
so there
learn
was a
every day.
post on LinkedIn a few months ago, and it had 3 women, beautifully dressed, business professionals, said, what do you see? Do you see gender? Do you see HR? They were all heads of HR of great companies. And I said, that's a stupid question. I see 3 great business people. And these 3 women are wonderful business people. And if you don't have that as your first image, you're in trouble. This is not about gender. It's not about role. It's about business. I'll give a quick example. When I talk about culture, a lot of people talk about culture. You don't want a toxic culture. And part of me goes, you're publishing that? I mean, guess what? Toxic cultures are bad. You put toxic in front of anything, it's probably a bad idea. That's just stupid. Culture, from a stakeholder view, is the identity of your firm. So think about culture. It's a brand, it's an identity in the mind of your key customer, so that that customer will be more likely to buy from you. I sit with executives and they say, is that what you mean by culture? And I say, of course, it's what I mean. You don't want to create a culture of a whole lot of ideas that are platitudes on a wall or on a card. You want to create a culture that shapes a customer impression of your company so that people are going to be more willing and likely to buy. And so when you build a leadership model, what's the brand you have in the marketplace? Are those the skills your leaders are being trained by? When you hire people, are you hiring against that external promise? When you pay people, are you paying people against that external promise? That point of view, I think, changes the engagement with customers. You don't want to sell a product to a customer. You want to build a relationship with the customer. And so when I work with HR people, I say, go with your salespeople to your customers. Well, what would I say? You look at the customer and say, you just bought a product or a service. 30% of what you buy in our space, we sell to you. We have 30% of your share. That's not enough. We want 50 or 60. The salesperson just sold you a product with great quality. Agree with quality. I want to build you a relationship. How am I going to do that? I'm going to go back and we're going to hire people, train people, pay people, communicate with people, structure all decision making in an organization, the HR stuff that meets what you need, so that we can go from 30 to 60% of what we sell, of what you buy in our space.
You have to stop right there because there's a major headline in what you just said. Folks, listen to this. I've been around. I've never heard this, Dave. How about HR going out on sales calls? How about that? That is a headline. I'm a sales guy. I love to sell, love to present. And as a publisher and editor, I always supported my sales team. Never occurred to me to bring the HR person. Talk about stakeholder management. So let's
Well,
get
and why are you doing it? Because you don't want to sell a product. Let's again, I believe the business side and the HR side co-vary. They go together. 30% of what you buy from us. Well, that's not enough. We want 60. We may not get 100. I'm not being stupid. And how am I going to do it? I'm going to hire, train, pay. Everything we do is going to get you a relationship. Then I look at Bruce, the sales guy, and I say, you get all the commission. And suddenly the sales guy goes, I like that.
Dave,
And
that
when
is a
we,
great idea, but we have so much to cover, and you're going to have to
yep,
go, and we're all going to have to go. So another point I wanted to be clear: I am not saying no. I agree with you. We have now gotten to the point everybody recognizes people are an issue. It wasn't lost on people that when the pandemic happened, we still had our CEOs, we still had our senior management, but all of our customers were employees and went away. What value is being created? So obviously, value is being created by our employees and our customers and our supply chains, and everybody woke up to that. But now, Dave, interestingly, we're going back to the old labor union and battles when let me ask you, Dave, is it an efficient way to establish compensation by bargaining violently with people? Shouldn't we really be looking in compensation in terms of value creation? Shouldn't we step back and go, well, gee, where is value being created? And are we aligning our compensation where value creation is? I don't see that much thinking, but am I wrong on that?
Well, there's some great thinkers on compensation. Charlie Tharp is one. He says compensation is communication. Look at how you're paying people. What's the message you're sending? The broader issue for me is how do we build our internal HR, whatever you want to call them, people practices, so the customers and investors get benefit? And there's some incredibly creative things. I'll give one example. I love the examples. They're concrete. I fly a lot. Well, I used to fly more, but anyway, this business of flying. Delta Airlines, 360, United, Global Services. Delta sends out 10 coupons, each worth $100. And here's what they say. Mr. Ulrich, you're one of our most frequent flyers. You've got a lot of miles on our airline. We're going to allocate, pick a number, 2% of our bonus money to be given out by our best customers. You now have 10 coupons worth $100 each. We give you $1,000 of bonus money.
Wow.
When you see a great, I've got some here. When you see a great service, and American does it, I've flown on them.
Yeah,
you call that employee over and you say, here's a coupon. I'm going to give you a bonus of $100. What a brilliant idea. I get to give away somebody else's money as a customer. Now, the philosophy is the employees get benefit when they do customer service directly by the customer who gets to give it out. I think that logic, Bruce, should be part of every compensation decision. Are you being paid? Here's an example. Let's go back to that sales example. I'm in HR. I'm now visiting you as a great customer. I'm going to bring with me my performance management, my OKRs, my KPIs, one company, other key result area programs, which stands for KRAP. I don't think that's a good title, but I'm going to bring my performance management. I'm going to put that in front of my customer and say, look at what we're holding our leaders accountable for. Are those the behaviors and outcomes you want from us? And the customer may go, not really. Well, then what do you want them to be accountable for? Let me get your voice. I love your work on engagement. I mean, your Enterprise Engagement Alliance. When we engage customers as much as we engage employees around these practices, suddenly, I love your word alignment, harmony. I'm picking up on your language. I want my customers to feel like they're joint partners in creating my compensation system. They can, A, give it out, kind of, that's a silly little example, or B, they can participate in creating it and then go the next step. Get them to come to the training, get them to involve in interviewing and hiring, get them to be part of the org structure. And the customers who do that get a better product and a better service. That's the logic that I get excited about. So where we started, this isn't about HR. HR is not about HR. HR is about helping your company succeed in the marketplace. The tagline I love, if it were my headline, HR is not about HR. It's about helping your company succeed in the marketplace because of your workplace. And if your company doesn't succeed in the marketplace, there is no workplace. There is no workplace. So HR people, get out of your chairs, get out of your offices, go talk to your marketing, sales, finance people, go talk to your investors, your customers. Show that what we do in this function creates value for them. That's the agenda.
Dave, I want to go back to the CEOs because I frankly think, a lot of HR takes a lot of tremendous hits. And yet I've worked at companies where HR was mission critical because what the company did with HR is they had them as lead agents with their employees. So every month, employees got checked in. Somebody checked in with them. Hey, how you doing? What's going on? Is there anything going on? Is there any problems here? What can we? And they didn't just fiddle around. Those people got back and they did something. And maybe it required getting Jane and Bill together to talk about why they're fighting all the time, right? So that's a wonderful side of HR. And I don't think we can lose that side of HR. And I think many people get into HR for that. And then companies don't create the position that skill would actually be very beneficial for. And we also need HR for compliance and all those other issues. But what you advocate for is viewing HR as a part of the business unit. And to do that, don't we have to start with the CEO and convince her or him, wait a minute, HR is not a sunk cost. It's a source of value creation. And if you analyze it, probably 60% of our organization's value is created specifically by those people. And we're treating them like a sunk cost. So don't we need to convince the CEO that your system, and I'm going to plug your system, that they have to have a system It can't just be a nice thing. HR, let's give everybody a day off on Friday, or 32-hour a week, or have unlimited vacations, which I think is ridiculous personally. No, it's a strategic and systematic system. And yes, you can change it, continuous improvement. Your voice will change it. But isn't that where we have to get CEOs thinking that it's not just bright, shiny objects?
Absolutely. I mean, all I can say to what you've said is amen, amen, amen. I mean, CEOs, for the most part, are well-intended, thoughtful, competent, dedicated executives, or they wouldn't be there. I mean, there are some that are wackos
Yeah.
and so you go to them, and again, I spend about half my time with business leaders, half with HR. When I'm with a business leader, I don't start by saying, let me show you the latest comp plan. Let me show you the latest hiring plan. I don't even want to talk about hybrid work. I don't want to talk about engagement. I want to talk about, what are you worried about today? I'm really worried that my product life cycle is getting old and I'm not reinventing fast enough. I'm worried that our competition is beginning to use technology in a way that we aren't. I'm worried about our costs are outpacing our SG&A costs are outpacing our competitors. We're losing market share. Terrific. I'd like to help you think through that problem. To solve any of those issues on your scorecard, I got 4 questions. Do you have the right people? Skills, talent, workforce? Do you have the right organization, culture, system, the team, the collaboration? Do you have the right leadership team and bench? Those are the 3 dimensions of good organization. And finally, do you have an HR department who will be your advisor and counselor in making that happen? And if you don't, up the grade. You can't afford to not have great HR. The funniest research, we did this with Korn Ferry. They had profiles of leaders, and you've all seen those. Here's the 10 dimensions of a good leader. And they had CEO profiles. We then went into the database and compared the top 20% of heads of HR. So here's the 10 dimensions of sets of vision, engages people, CEO profile. We compared CHROs, marketing, finance, and technology, C-suite. The top 20% of HR heads had the closest profile to the CEO. Let me say that again. It was closer than finance, technology, and marketing. Now, be careful. It was only the top 20% of CHROs, their pay versus time in position. The average HR people had a big gap. But the best HR people, Bruce, are doing the stuff you talk about and that I talk about.
Well, let's
They're
get to that
sitting
right
there.
now. Let's
Yeah.
get to that because I think it's an enormous opportunity for HR. In fact, I think HR has a better opportunity for the reasons you've said than it has ever had. And that, I hate to say it, but HR is its own worst enemy. I look at what they say on LinkedIn, and there are so many platitudes every day. Any CEO, and I've been a CEO most of my life of small companies, but nonetheless, you look at that stuff, oh, just it's warm and fuzzy nonsense. And then I look at your stuff and I go, okay, that's where I'm going to create value. So are we training? Look, we want empathetic HR people. We need HR people who understand compliance. But how do we train that new CHRO is it being taught at your school, for instance? I bet it is. It's certainly in your class to know how to implement a systematic approach to value creation through people. And they could use your system. They could use the others that are up and coming. But that's the one thing you left out. You need a system. You need the will and the way and the talent. You need a
Totally
system.
agree. Totally agree. I love sports. Look at the leading college football teams. Alabama has what's called a process. Michigan is finally getting
Everyone.
the system works. And for me, the system has 4 dimensions. Do you have the right people? Well, let's go through what that means. Have you hired them? Have you trained them? Have you paid them? Have you incented them? Have you given them a great experience? That workforce is really so key because people are the key ingredients of any menu. Then do you have the right team? Do you have the right organization? We call that capability. Competence is individual, capability. Do you have the right ability to work together, to build agility, to build innovation, to build a culture, to build an identity? Do you have the right leadership? Have you identified the skills of leaders? Have you trained and invested in leaders? When we manage talent, organization, and leadership, the system works. And then the HR function has to begin to be a supporter of that system. I don't think HR is the owner. I have a fun test when I teach students, and I haven't taught degree students for a few years. who has primary accountability and responsibility for the human capability, talent, organization, leadership system, your word, within a company? 1, line manager. 2, head of HR. 3, it's shared. 4, the consultant. 5, I don't care, I'm going into finance. And I love that answer. Almost everybody answers 3, it's shared. And I say it's wrong. If you're the CEO, you are the one with ultimate accountability for the system, your words, of making it work.
Well,
and if you don't make that work, you're going to pay a price, because you're going to create an organization that doesn't have sustainable value.
well, in the old model where you just managed to the next quarter, you can get away with that, right?
Yeah, that's true. Good
But
point.
in the new model, where investors are looking for a more sustainable path with less risk, right, and less volatility, they're looking for a CEO with a purpose, vision, mission, and values. Now, let's go back to you again, because again, do you think there's a need and an opportunity to have more senior level business training for those in HR? You know, by the way, one professor in HR once told me something. He said people go into HR because they don't like business, right? And he was kind of saying it tongue in cheek, but he was an experienced HR professor. But there is HR people who want to create value through people. I see them on LinkedIn. Is there sufficient training for them? I mean, or can they just go out and get your stuff and learn it? I mean,
We're trying, and a lot of people are repackaging stuff and putting it out, and we're getting it out there. My sense is HR people have an unhealthy fear. My wife's a psychologist. I have her picture if you see it. Oh, you're in psychology because you like people. And she goes, most of the people I like are not always likable. I mean, it's,
she must be from New York.
Anywhere. And I hear the stories and I go, wow. And somebody, I'm going into HR because I like people. I think that's a legacy false positive. I think it's positive. I like people, but I like to solve problems to help people. Let me say again, I love this test. What's the most important thing a business or HR leader can give an employee? Believe, become, belong, be safe, all the above, or none of the above. And everybody says, all the above, believe, become, belong. And I say, no. The most important thing a business or HR leader can give an employee is a company that succeeds in the marketplace. Because if you don't succeed in the marketplace, there's no job. I did a session for, anyway, I'll share it. I don't know, Bruce, if you've ever been intimidated. I get intimidated sometimes when I have to do sessions. This was Amazon Web Services, 100 top people, all almost 70 PhDs out of the 100, and math, science, physics, just my degree's in English. I mean, I read books and got a degree, my undergraduate, my PhD's in statistics, but I'm going, they're not going to listen to me because they're getting all these algorithms. So I started by saying, what do these companies have in common? Digital equipment, old, compact, Gateway, Toys R Us, Sears, People Express, Eastman Kodak. One of them yelled out, they all went broke. And I yelled back, I consulted for every one of them. And they stopped and said, who is this bozo? And I said, I did. I consulted for Kodak, and they lost because they had great internal practices that weren't connected to the marketplace.
Every one of those companies I knew, every one of them. How about, I'll give you a great example, Blockbuster.
Oh, great company.
They had to die.
Blueberry, great company.
But they got arrogant. They created all these silos. It became Fortress Blockbuster. So that Netflix, I heard this anecdotally, walked in there, was desperate to practically give the company away because they were out of money. And they were haughtily shown to the door. I believe that is true, folks. But either way, you and I have seen that. And we don't, by the way, I want to tell everybody, we do have a bunch of people on the call. We're going to be ending right at the top of the hour, even though we got a little late to start because of me. So if you have any questions, put them in your chat. But I have one last big question for you that could easily take up the last 10 minutes. And that is transparency. I believe that we are entering an era of transparency, the likes of which people have never seen. And it's being driven by two major forces. One, the marketplace. People want to know what the heck is going on. And number two, a little law that nobody in this US yet really understands is going to have a big impact, and that's called the European Union Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, otherwise known as the anti-greenwashing law. And the Europeans have decided that they want to be the leaders in sustainability, but they also want to be the leaders in rooting out greenwashing. So they passed a law that is going to affect lots of US companies, and it's going to affect a lot of little companies, because big companies are required to find out information from their value chain. Now, Dave, I've told you about this law before. You haven't talked about it much less because it's probably, a little abstract to your audience, but it ain't going to be for long, because it's just like GDPR, the Privacy Act, that has had enormous impact all around the world, even though it doesn't apply to my company, because well, it actually does. I do business in Europe, I guess. But my point is that transparency is also being driven by one other thing: trust, right? Trust. Everyone talks about trust being the number one thing. Well, how do you establish trust without transparency? So I'm going to turn this into a question, I promise, a little lecture. But for instance, in AI, there's a very simple, immediate thing that every company should do that I haven't seen one company do yet: publish your policies on AI on your website. How are you using it? What do you do? Who's in charge? Who's going to be affected? What are your purpose? Blah, blah, blah. It's all these people go to Congress, Dave, and not one person that I heard says, hey, publish right now your disclosures. And the AI company should get together right now and create standards. It's done by ISO all the time. So, Dave, it's another example of, frankly, people just spinning their wheels to avoid dealing with an issue. But that's another issue. So, getting to you. The transparency, one of the things in the law is that you have to talk about how you treat your customers, how you treat your employees, how you treat the supply chain partners, their distribution partners, how your people are treated, and your policy. And there's this concept that people are trying to make very complicated that's very simple, called double materiality. And don't tell me it's complicated. It's as simple as the golden rule. How is it that your company is creating opportunities and risks for your stakeholders? And how are your stakeholders in the environment creating risks for you and opportunities for you? So, Dave, if you agree that this new world of transparency is upon us, or if you disagree, please tell me. But isn't that going to force companies to really finally address this issue? Because guess what they're going to have to report next year? Their employee turnover, the ratio of the employee pay to the CEO, the distribution of pay by gender across an age across your organization. They're going to have to put that in writing. Now, whether people like that or not, I'm not here to say. I'm a libertarian, but that's the law. Are we entering an era of transparency that may force companies finally to really look at this strategically?
I hope so. I'm going to answer that at two levels. I'll be personal in a strange way. You mentioned Deming, you mentioned Drucker. Wouldn't it have been cool to have been able to be transparent with them? Don't just read the published book that's been filtered by 5 editors. That's what I love about LinkedIn. I'm not anywhere near as smart, and I've seen Deming speak. I was in a session with Drucker once. I think transparency at every level is so key. That's what I love about this. I see you, I see me. Guess what? People just noticed you and I have some warts. We couldn't get this stupid thing to work for 6 minutes. Okay, we screwed up.
I couldn't.
No, didn't. I couldn't. I couldn't get on. I mean, we screwed up. Okay, done. Move on. I think that transparency of thinking, wouldn't it be cool to have had those great thought leaders as part of our life? That's why I like LinkedIn, because you get to be transparent with people who disagree with you, and you don't care where they come from. It could be a 25-year-old student in India. I don't care where they come from. I want those ideas. So that's the personal transparency that I think is so critical. Organizational transparency, amen, amen, amen. It's called disclosure. The European law is pushing that through their European law. The US is pushing it through disclosures, through SEC regulation. We have tested it. That's why we were with Amazon. We put together through AI a way to scrape or score your company's disclosure. We did it for 7,000 companies. Let's score your disclosure on those issues. Guess what? The regressions, I do love statistics, the statistics are double survey scores. We can predict employee productivity, financial performance, social responsibility by what you disclose about your human capability. I think we're going to see more on this, and I think that disclosure is going to give us transparency, and I think it's so critical. Why? Because 60 to 80% of a firm's market value are the intangibles. Two firms in the same industry that both earn 100 will have up to 20 to 30% difference in market value based on this stuff. And we can now track it. We can score it. To me, Bruce, this is Sisyphus getting to the top of this hill. You said we're not at the hill yet. I'm not at the hill. The boulders rolled over me for 20 years, but I'm optimistic we're getting closer.
I do. I
to
agree.
where we can see that value, and CEOs jump on board, CFOs jump on board, boards jump on board, customers jump on board, investors jump on board. When they can see that what happens around talent, organization, leadership, I call that human capability. When they see the materiality of those items, they win. They don't care about, no offense here, I'm going to get in trouble. They don't care as much about the HR function as what that function invisibly provides to build talent, organization, leadership.
And
I just got to say thank you.
And value.
Well, that's the value. That's the whole value. That's the value chain. And value is defined by the receiver. When I got my wife gifts when we were first married, I'd get her tickets to sporting events, and she'd say, "Enjoy yourself." Value is defined by those receivers. It's not defined. When I see HR people, tell me the biggest challenge in your job today: a new comp system, hybrid work, employee engagement, whatever the topic du jour is. I say, no, the biggest challenge in your job today is helping your company succeed in a marketplace, because that's where the value is created. That's the value.
The headline.
Thank you for what you do. I know.
I'm going to recap. Hold on. Don't run away. We're going to do a quick recap here, folks, for everybody. First, we've introduced you today to really don't be fooled by imposters. You are here on this screen. This is the man who is really the original person to implement a strategic and systematic approach. He has in human resources. He has always challenged human resources. Frankly, Dave, I feel a lot of advisors in this field follow. I listen to all these seminars. They all talk to each other, tell each other what they want to hear. You never did that. You did it in a polite way, and people respect it. And you never insulted anybody. So that was one of the reasons I wanted to hold this webinar.
Thank you.
Secondly, I think we established something very important. It wasn't the purpose of the webinar, but if you have those of you in HR who view yourselves as part of the company's thought leader on communication, stay in your lane. Don't allow people to guilt you into telling you that you have to express sympathy. You should have sympathy for everybody. Organizations have a big open tent, all stakeholders of good faith, left, right, center, Trump, I don't care who they vote for. I want them in my organization if they care about my organization, and I want them to feel welcome. So don't ever ask me to take stands on anything. I won't. So we talked about that. But then we really talked about, Dave's a little bit more optimistic than I, about companies really are beginning to get that that human capital truly is a source of value creation, that it can affect the bottom line. The receptivity is growing rapidly, and yes, the reason you knew have competition in human capital management systems or whatever operating systems is because people are recognizing that. That's the proof, Dave. And then we got into all sorts of great details finally on how the core of an operating system is, what it focuses on, and we'll be summarizing that in this article that will also come out. So Dave, don't hang up before I stop this recording. I want to speak with you for 1 minute. But folks, thank you very much for joining us. This will be live in the next couple of days. We'll summarize it in an article, and it will be all over our newsletter and social media in the next week. Thanks, everybody, and look forward to seeing you in our next show. Thanks again, Dave, for doing everything that you do.
Thank you. Thank you. The best test of leadership for me, simple test. Do you leave an interaction feeling better or worse about yourself? Online and now in person virtually, Bruce, I've never left an interaction not feeling better about myself. Thank you.
Well, I feel the same way, and we've never even met. So just stand by. I'm going to stop the recording. Thanks again.